Hey everyone, welcome to the Finding Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Adam Vohra, and I'm so grateful to have you here. This podcast is all about exploring the journeys of incredible individuals, people who have faced adversity, found their purpose, and are now making an impact in their communities. But it's also about my journey. Over the years, I've faced my own obstacles, moments of doubt, and struggles with identity. Through it all, I found my purpose in giving back, creating a space where people can detach from the negative emotions and stigmas they may associate with their own stories, just like I did with mine. Here, we have real conversations about growth, resilience, and transformation. Whether you're searching for direction, striving for personal development, or simply looking for a place to feel seen and understood, this is for you. So if these conversations resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us on social media. Now let's dive into today's episode. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. My name is Adam and I'm your host. Before we dive in, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for your continued support. Your listens, reviews, and shares mean the world to me. This podcast is all about shining a light on people who are not only living their purpose, but also impacting their communities in incredible ways. So if you haven't already, make sure to follow, rate, and leave a review to help us keep growing this amazing community. Last week, I had an incredible conversation with Dana Safone, a powerhouse in the restaurant industry, about leadership, vision, and executing with excellence. So if you haven't checked that episode out yet, I highly recommend it. But today, we're shifting gears to explore a different kind of transformation. I'm here to introduce Julie Vincent, a woman who turned personal pain into a mission for healing, clarity, and joy. After navigating the depths of grief, loss, and self-discovery, Julie found her true calling in helping others clear both physical and emotional space to create a life filled with purpose. As the founder of Clear Space for Joy, she empowers people to declutter their minds, hearts, and homes, guiding them towards a more intentional and fulfilling way of living. Her journey is one of resilience, purpose, and profound impact, and I can't wait for you to hear her insights. Let's dive in.
Hi.
Hi, Julie.
Thank you so much for having me. And
Thank you.
Very kind words.
Of course. No, I was able to really dive into your website, and I listened to the podcast episode that you shared with me, and I was just really captivated with the way you have transformed yourself and really live purposefully in your mission to spread joy, which is, easier said than done.
That's right.
So I just kind of want to dive into your personal story. I think it's really important for my audience to know who you are.
Sure.
So maybe we can start there.
Sure. So, I think I started out with a pretty normal childhood, grew up focused on sports and really like loving life, but then kind of hit some challenges physically. So I was born with something called hip dysplasia. I had a couple surgeries when I was a baby and a toddler and really didn't experience a ton of pain until probably mid-college, where I started to feel some issues in my hips and my lower back. And long story short, over time of college and moving after college, I guess I wasn't really taking the best care of myself during that time. Didn't really know what wellness was besides sports. And, I think what ended up happening is because there wasn't a lot of awareness of my body, I was starting to experience more and more pain. And during that time, just decided to kind of do some things like yoga and really dip my toe into that when I was living in California. And, basically worked and did that. And the pain kind of lessened through those things. And over time, worked harder and harder because I grew up with the belief that the harder you work, the more successful you are. And basically hit some challenges with work and decided that, I was going to just dig even deeper into doing more things outside of work to make myself feel well, because I didn't feel at the time that I had the ability to change what I was doing for my career. right? When you're young and you need to make money to survive, you kind of just say, well, this is the path I chose and this is what I have to do. And you don't see a lot of options, or at least I didn't at the time. So I dug deeper into kind of the yoga world and started to get more interested in how I was fueling my body. And then long story short, I met my husband in San Diego where I was living, and we moved to New York City after some time. And I still remained on that same trajectory in the corporate world. I was in marketing and I was working at an agency and I was moving my way up, and I sort of checked all of those success boxes, if you will. So, I was making money, I was getting promoted, I had access to high, people, and I felt like I should feel really proud and good, but I just didn't. And so at that time, I was about to get married, and I thought to myself, you know what? This feels like I need to do something bigger than, just doing something outside of work. Like, I was doing acupuncture at the time and yoga and all of those things. And I decided to dig deeper and do the yoga teacher training. And during that 3-month period, I realized that my mind was so closed and I hadn't connected with anything kind of greater than myself for years. I grew up Catholic and was raised in a really strict kind of manner in that way, but decided to kind of dig into spirituality and something a little bit more broader at the time. And that opened my mind completely to the wellness world. And so through the yoga teacher training, I ended up transitioning afterwards to not just teach yoga, but to a completely different job, leveraging my old experience and putting in the new to corporate wellness, and decided to kind of grow my journey that way. And that ended up leading me towards doing something that was a lot more meaningful. Over time, I had my first son, and, I ended up being at home with him because working part-time didn't work that well, and was, I guess you could say, kind of bored. Even though I was really focused on being a mom, I knew that something wasn't, it was missing. And so I decided to go back to school, and I ended up realizing that I could do school while my son was sleeping. And I graduated the Institute of Integrative Nutrition the day before my daughter was born, so my second child, and created a business from that, from my own personal experiences. And then fast forward, the pain came back. The hip pain came back, and came back through my first pregnancy and then my second pregnancy. I think I started to really realize there was message in it. And then one day I couldn't really walk anymore. I could hardly walk my kids to the bus stop or go get the mail. And I was in so much pain that it physically stopped me in my tracks. And there really wasn't any more choice. I finally went to the doctor, and he immediately said, you need a hip replacement. You've got bone-on-bone pain and hip spurs and all of these things I won't bore you with, but, really kind of intense stuff. And that would force me to realize that the choice was to get a full hip replacement at the age of 41 years old, completely stop my business, completely pause all of the things that I was working on, and give in and surrender to what life needed me to deal with. From there, the story goes on, and I'm happy to speak to that, the transformation. That's really where I found my purpose.
Wow. That's a lot. And it's funny because, that hip injury proved to be the catalyst for your change.
That's right.
One of the things that I read about you, and you were talking about going through the hip replacement, and you were talking about the recovery thereafter, how you were completely debilitated.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that one day that you just decided to go on a walk with your cane.
Mm-hmm.
And you were taking in nature, and you were taking in the birds, and you're taking in the deer, and talk about that moment.
Yeah, it gives me the chills. My whole body's lighting up. I had to walk with the cane when I was recovering, and the PT would tell you, like, go, 2 steps, go 10 steps, go, quarter mile. And I knew that I could do it. But I think being on the couch, it felt like a huge deal. one sunny day, I was like, I'm just going to go, and who cares if people see me walking around in a cane? I just like all of that stuff started to fall away. All the cares of what other people were thinking about me, it just didn't matter. I wanted to feel better. Right. And so I'm walking down the street. I can picture it now. And it was like the sun was sparkling extra that day, and then you start to see all of the little glimmers that are around you. And you appreciate the small things, right? I was outside of my house off the couch. I was walking steps without pain, and I think just going around the block was a life-changing moment to say, I did this. I completed the hard challenge. I'm taking the baby steps forward, and just focusing on like what it is that I had to do that day and appreciating all of the beauty and the things around me that were reminding me that the small joys are what really mattered for my wellness.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, one of the things that one thing that often came up when I honestly did research a little bit on you and was the word surrender and how you had a moment of surrender, obviously, when you had to succumb and realize that you need to take the surgery. And then during that recovery process, finally surrendering to like, hey, like if I want to change the trajectory of not only my physical being, but my mindset, I had to surrender to this, accept it, and, change like my behaviors. What were some of the, let's actually just talk about that word surrender. I want to focus on that what does the word surrender to you mean now?
Opportunity. It really means opportunity. When you can surrender, you know that something is going to come from it, right? There is a change that is happening. It's a letting go first, right? It's letting go of what you're holding onto that no longer serves you. It's a letting go of the pain. It's a letting go of the trauma. But knowing that when you can feel yourself and hold yourself through that tough moment, which might be more than a second, right? It can be days, it can be weeks, whatever that moment is, allowing yourself to feel it. And then knowing that past that is something so much brighter is what surrender means, right? And there's purpose behind that. Yep. There's always purpose behind it.
It's so funny because, for me, the word surrender, I associate it very much with my recovery and finally making a conscious decision to stop drinking and to jump into the recovery space. And one thing I heard early on, the significance of surrender, it's not giving up. And I think oftentimes people associate surrender with quitting and giving up, which are negative connotations. Sure. And someone told me it's not quitting, it's not giving up, it's simply putting the sword down. And it's stopping fighting. And then I was able to understand that really I was just fighting myself. And when he put it in that context, it allowed me to see surrender the same way that you just laid out and the purpose that was on the other end of it. I think that, as you were going through your recovery and your process and you were leaning into sharing that, what were some of the ideas that popped up early on?
I think less force, more flow, right? What happened to me was, over the years, me pushing hard, whether it was in my career, my personal life, and trying to make certain things happen. And I do believe that some of that manifested in pain in my body. And so I think when that was physically removed from me, right?
Yeah.
It was a relief. It was such a lesson that there was ability for me to kind of let things be and not push so hard, right? I think we live in a world where so many people push so hard, right? And it's a lot of it just comes from our old belief system, the way we were raised, other people's opinions and thoughts, which leads to negative self-talk in a loop in your head. And all of these things are related, right? So I think there was an opportunity there to learn, like, the less I push and force and go with that kind of a mindset, the more opportunity I have for flow, which is leading me to see more of the glimmers, the little joys, the positivity, and the lessons in all of the challenges.
I love that, because I think the imposition of self-will is something that so many people do, and I personally have done in so many facets of my life, when really I just kind of needed to accept the circumstances for what they are and make the best out of it. But that's not an easy task. And especially, you know, for yourself, you know, like really having to, like, it's going to heal when it heals, and understanding you could do things to facilitate it. But then on the broader sense, incorporating that into just like daily routines and incorporating that into just a mindset. What are some things that you do on a daily basis to ensure that you're not, quote unquote, taking your will back?
Sure. Well, going back to the hip replacement, I think that the process of healing and the physical therapy was the perfect example how small daily actions and rituals lead to big outcomes, right? I ended up doing Pilates at 5 weeks and tennis at 4 months. And, you know, I was really focused on the daily things and healed probably a little quicker than the average person that gets a hip replacement. Mind you, I was younger, right?
Yeah.
Because I was so focused on my small daily habits and rituals. So I think taking from that, you know, it's a really large part of what I practice and teach through my coaching is small daily rituals and how they can lead to really large outcomes over time. So for me personally, I wake up in the morning at 6 o'clock every day, regardless of the day it is, unless I'm on vacation. And I immediately put my noise canceling headphones on my ears and I listen to a meditation. And the meditation can change depending on how I feel. Sometimes that's 5 minutes, sometimes that's 25 minutes. But that is before I do anything, that happens. Then I take out my journal and I write what I'm thinking, stream of conscious. At the end of that, I decide in that moment what it is that I'm going to do for self-care in my day. So I say, I meditate, I'm journaling, I'm going to nourish my body with a healthy homemade lunch. You know, I'm going to weightlift today or walk or do yoga or play tennis, whatever it is and I'm putting it into my journal and committing to myself that that's what I'm going to do, because the next morning I go back and I check to see if I did it. Right. So that's how I start my morning. I do have 2 kids, 7 and 9. You know, they're like, they wake up right after that. And it's sort of like all of a sudden, you know, we're trying to get everybody off and whatever to school. But I think once they go to school, I try to take a moment to ground and recenter before I start my business day. So I'll try to sip my coffee in the sunny chair in my home. Sometimes I'll read a little bit or just take some moments, look out the window, see what I see, people walking by, and just be mindful. Then I try my best right now to not overschedule. So leaving space, you know, on purpose in my day so that I'm not rushing, because I have a tendency to rush, you know, and rushing always leads to the stress response in your body, your nervous system being deregulated. And even if you get there on time, you're not your best self because you rushed, right? So that's definitely something I work on a daily basis. And then in my week, I try to drip in little moments of joy, whether it be like meeting a friend for coffee or you know, doing something with one of my kids one-on-one, or having time with my husband, having alone time. You know, those are things that I think are self-care for me and that I work on scheduling in and committing to, right? And then I wind down at the end of the day, always with things like my skincare routine, a nice long warm shower. I love to read. I have a mindful book club in my work, and I also read fiction, and I'm in a book club for that. So, you know, things that I know that really make me feel good, I try to do every day.
Julie, it's so funny because I'm not gonna lie. I was thinking about your hip injury, and well, it's not really an injury. It just what happened with your hip. And, you know, recently, like, I went to a chiropractor, and I'm all messed up, and I didn't even realize it. And it was probably from like deadlifting and lifting heavy for as long as I've been doing. And really, I've just been punishing my body. And he did this whole scan, and the one thing that he said, he was like, you're totally misaligned to your hips. And he has me with like a little riser in the shoe now. And normally, maybe 5 years ago, if I heard that news, I probably would have went into panic mode. Understanding the incremental recovery, to say that I'm going to have to kind of undergo, which obviously pales in comparison to what you went through, is something that now I'm able to do because I too lean into routines and lean into habits and understand it's like the little things. I love that you incorporate routines into your days now. Is that a contrast from what it was like before?
I don't think so. I think I had more.
Really?
I'm a Virgo.
Okay.
I'm a recovering perfectionist, I should say, right?
Okay.
And I think that I was overdoing it.
Okay.
So there's some surrender and release and going with the flow involved with this, right? It's not like every day I wake up and I'm like writing the same exact thing down and doing the exact same thing every day. My days always change, right?
Yeah.
Depending on if I have an event, client, like podcast, whatever it is. So there's flexibility that innately needs to exist. And I've learned that that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to cancel or someone cancels on me. And that used to upset me so much. I would be so upset when someone would cancel, even though I knew it wasn't personal. I just was mad that I didn't have like the plan, right? And now that I've detached from those outcomes and actually now look at them as opportunities, like, oh, well, if someone canceled, now I can like go for a walk. Or, now I can do that thing that was on my list that I want to check off. So I think there's actually more like flow happening than there used to be.
One of the things you just said is like I detach from outcomes. And it sounds like prior, that perfectionist nature would allow you to kind of get in your head about certain things that didn't go your way, as
Absolutely.
now you just kind of go with the flow. Detaching from outcomes is easier said than done. Particularly when we live in this world where you are, planning things and you're setting goals and you have these tiers and you have these quotas, and it's really, that's how society is fueled now. How do you detach from outcomes, but also maintain discipline in your day-to-day practice?
I think I lean on trust a lot. It's something that I've been focusing on specifically for 2025. I trust that what's happening is meant to happen and that it's going to guide me or redirect me into whatever's best for me and others, right? So I think that when it comes to detaching from outcomes, I have to have the mindfulness to say, okay, I'm going to pause. I might allow myself to react the way that, isn't great. And I won't feel good, or I'll cry, or I'll get mad or whatever. And I allow myself to have that moment, like I said. But then from there, it's what you do. It's the choice. That's the mindset work, right? You choose to believe and trust that this is meant to be, or you can choose to get frustrated, create a whole entire story that goes on loop in your mind, and then hate the people that were involved.
Yeah.
Right? It's up to you. We always have a choice as to how we respond.
It's so funny because I love that. And now I'm really able to identify when I'm responding and when I'm reacting. And I think that's super important. Whereas I know I'm reacting when it's knee jerk or when it's emotionally driven, rather than I'm responding when I'm taking that moment of pause. And I love that you practice that, because I think that's so important to just kind of incorporate into a decision-making process, but it also just for your own personal peace, where you're able to just take something that unexpected coming your way and being able to sit there, acknowledge it, and not react immediately. And, I've been in positions where I was very reactive and I was imposing my own will, and I was just not in the right headspace. And a lot of times the outcomes that I wanted to happen didn't happen. And now when outcomes that don't happen that I want to happen, a lot of times it opens doors to bigger opportunities. Right. And I think that's something that I was missing, and a lot of people are missing, where it's like the universe has a purpose in your story and your journey. So I want to kind of lean into a clear space for joy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny because I thought it was a clear space for joy, but it's clear space for joy.
Mm-hmm.
And talk to me about that personal process where you were clearing space for joy and what that was like. I mean, I know we encompassed a lot of your story there, but the vision behind it is super important, and we'll just start there.
Yeah, I think when I first started out my business, it was called Hearth Wellness. It was a different business name. And, you know, I started it when I was a new mom. And I think, you know, the best experience comes from your own life experience. So I was coaching people on my own life experience about how to, you know, live well in motherhood. And there was nothing inauthentic about that, right?
Yeah.
But I think that over time, I started to feel like I should be doing X and I should be doing Y and I should be doing Z. And I eventually kind of built up a business that I didn't necessarily connect with as much. And I had that realization when my hip replacement happened and I was sidelined on the couch.
What were the things you felt you were lacking in with the Hearth?
I think I was really, really focused on the nutrition point and, you know, getting really into like family nutrition. And these were all the things where I was like, I don't know that that's where I want to go. You know, like that's not necessarily what I talk about on the daily basis. And I definitely was living it, but it didn't feel like it was my like number one area of expertise. I sort of ended up getting, you know, passed down that river without like really having intention there. That's what people wanted me to do. And so I said yes versus me, you know, like authentically creating that to happen. And so I think I had the opportunity during that time to really learn like, okay, what is it that I connect with? What is it that I think I'm good at? You know, and how can I create something from there? And it wasn't a detachment from that. It was a growth of it, right? So then that was when I stepped into, I think it's the mindset piece, right? I can still teach people how to nourish their body and move well and, you know, focus on spirituality and relationships and all that stuff and add the mindset piece to it that really can help them clear their mind, right? So they're clearing their space in their body, their mind, and in their heart. So that's where Clear Space for Joy came from. Was I think that there's a lot more than I can offer, right? And I worked with a branding company to create that brand and the website that I launched back in 2023. And it was just a wonderful experience to work with those experts who brought that out, you know, talking to me day after day about what it is I stood for, hearing my stories, you know. And it was really just wonderful to have someone help me develop what it was and put a name to it. And I was afraid to, I guess, attach myself to the word joy, which is funny, right?
Really?
Yeah, I was a little afraid. I think I cared what people thought at that point still. You know, I was like, well, people are going to label me the joy girl and like that all I care about is joy and like,
Julie Joy.
Julie Joy, right? And I do care a lot about joy, but that's not the point. The point of the conversation in Clear Space for Joy, if you read my website, if you listen to what I talk about, you know, I share on Instagram at I am Julie Vincent, is that joy is the whole point of wellness, right? Joy is the whole point, and it can get you through the challenges and make you feel happy, right? It's there for all of it. And it's a tool. So for me, I realized that it was the missing ingredient in my wellness routine. It was the missing ingredient in what I was coaching people on, you know? And yeah, so I think that's where the brand came from and what I stand for now.
I love that. And the one thing that you talked about, and I think it takes a lot of courage, and a lot of entrepreneurs are in that space where they feel like they're stuck and they've already branded themselves and they're in a box and now they got to run with it. And managing that pivot from the Hearth to Clear Space from Joy, clear Space for Joy, is awesome, because that's something in a sense that I had to do as well, where it's like, you know what, like I don't really want to work in the nonprofit space as much. I really just want to kind of lean into events, lean into podcasts, and eventually lean into coaching. And for me, that's the same exact thing where I felt like, oh, well, I'd already announced myself doing this. And what are people going to say? And am I a failure? And it's like, no, this just wasn't who I was to begin with. So,
Right. And it's a huge part of your story, right? It's actually a positive.
yeah.
When I look back, it's what I've done my whole life. I've always been a good pivoter. I've always been able to leverage what I was doing before, take pieces of that experience and move it forward to the next thing, right? And I wouldn't ever be able to connect the dots looking forwards to what I'm doing today when I was 16 years old, but I can certainly connect the dots looking backwards.
Yeah. No, totally. And it's funny because that was something that I had to do, like really dig deep back into the past, who I was, or pivotal moments. Was there ever any pivotal moment that you can go back to either in your childhood or early on with your immediate family where you can now attribute to, wow, that was a turning point, but that I can now acknowledge?
Beyond my hip replacement, my daughter was born with a traumatic birth. That was a huge pivotal moment for me. I think that was a moment where I was like, oh, life isn't always as expected. I didn't know what was going to happen. It was a surprise, and very difficult time that has taught me so much.
Was she ill, or was the process didn't go as planned?
She ended up having something.
Okay.
And we found out years later. But it was a crazy surprise.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what was going to happen. And, she got rushed to the NICU and, as soon as she was born, and it was a really hard time. And I think it taught me so much about like unexpected things happening and parenthood and how life's lessons don't always come in the way that you want.
Yeah.
But there was so much of my purpose that was born the day she was born, and
that was the day after you graduated.
It was a great day after I graduated. Right? That's right. Right. A crazy time.
Yeah.
One day you graduate, the next day you have a baby, and it doesn't go as planned, and your life completely shifts forever. She's doing well and thriving, right? But it was a crazy time of my life, and I definitely didn't know how to deal with it back then. And I didn't have all the tools I have now. And I think that was for a reason, and I went through a lot of hardship and trauma and poor feelings, and that all of those experiences. And then, a couple of years later, having the hip replacement, all of it all has meaning. It all has purpose, right? I'm not one of those people who, when I was 18 years old, like went to college and knew exactly what I wanted to be, right? I think that's amazing.
There's a lot of those people.
There are still people. There are
some.
I think it's amazing when people have that. And actually, I think my daughter might be one of them. But I wasn't that person. And I took a lot of rights and lefts and went through a lot of crazy times to get to where I am. And it's still not perfect or anything, and it never will be. Yeah. That isn't the point. The point is to find, this purpose that you stand for, to find meaning in life, to find the reason to wake up in the morning, to find an opportunity to help others, to build community. That's really, where I think a lot of joy comes from and wellness comes from.
I love that. And, you mentioned trauma and joy being a pillar of your business. When you're talking to a client or even a friend who has gone through a trauma where it's so hard for them to extract joy from their story, how do you help them?
Well, if they're in it, I hold space. I don't ever give advice when they're in it, right? Because I personally understand that when you get advice that you don't want to hear or you aren't ready to hear, all it creates is, a negative feeling and frustration and sometimes bitterness. So I am a really good listener and I ask great questions And that's how I, hold space for people. If I'm super close with them, doing things for them that I know that they'll appreciate, acts of love, and, giving hugs.
You're just letting them know that you're there.
Just letting them know I'm there. When they're coming out of it, I ask permission to help guide them in the meaning. And, again, asking questions, pointing out things that I see as opportunities, and helping them see where the light is and, take the steps towards making the meaning purposeful.
It's such a powerful role that you have, especially the way that you described navigating it, because it's kind of like sprinkling breadcrumbs, just indicating to them that you're there and that you're supportive. And sometimes that's all that people need.
That's right.
I know personally, like when I've been in traumatic situations, the friends that I feel really were by me the most were the ones who didn't do too much, and just showed up. And I think that's like such a powerful thing. And then once they're open and they're ready, providing them with whatever's necessary and asking the right questions and listening is super powerful. Who was that for you?
Dorothy, definitely. My friend Brianne. I've got a lot of really important people in my life that live all over the country. I met some really important people when I lived in San Diego. I met some really important people when I lived in New York. I now have people in Connecticut. There are people that have been there through thick and thin that I hardly talk to, but when I need them, they're there. They're my joy crew, and my sacred crew of people. A lot of them don't know each other, but some of them do now. I've kind of gone on the journey of connecting them when they're local, and that's been cool. And now some of them, like Dorothy, has had Brianne on her podcast, and now Brianne knows some of my other friends. And it's like so joyful to see the people that you care about that have held space for you, like hold space for each other in a different way. So yeah,
Those
there's
group chats.
Yeah. My husband, definitely. He's a great listener. Some family members. Yeah.
Nice. I want to talk about motherhood and the philosophies that you stand by professionally and you share with the world. How do you lead with them on your journey of motherhood?
It's a challenge, but it's super important to me. And I think, like I said, all of the things that I've learned have shifted me as a whole person. So that affects my parenting. I definitely allow my kids to feel their feelings, which can be tough as a parent, right? You have to hold space for them to have their temper tantrum, to slam the door, to cry, to, whatever. That triggers me a lot of the time. And I do my deep breathing and my work so that I can hold the space for them when they need it. I also use a lot of the tools that I teach. So breath work, meditation.
Yeah, I was listening on the last podcast and you were talking about.
Yeah, I do breath work with my kids all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like belly breath or deep breathing, and I will literally have them stop and pause and say, this is a moment for you to breathe. The only thing that will help you now is if you deep breathe. And we do it, and they listen. And now they do it on their own, which is super cool.
Wild.
They really do. So that is something that I do. I think that, I take them on some of my trips and things where I help them to engage in exploring and adventure, which is something that is just a big part of who I am and the way I live my life. And I teach them that there's a lot of value in that no matter where you go. I teach them about glimmers. Sometimes they think
Glimmers?
the special things you see when you go for a walk, right? Sometimes they think I'm crazy and they'll, say things like, Mom, there's not always like meaning in the bird that's in the tree, But now I see like my son being like, I saw that cardinal, and they point it out now, things that they see. I grew up, my mom was like that. She loved to take pictures and she would point out things that she saw. And so I think I got a little bit of that from her. I really just teach them and guide them to appreciate life. We have a daily gratitude practice at dinner. When we have family dinner, we go around the table and very quickly we just say one thing we're grateful for. And now my kids bring it up and I don't have to bring it up. Mom, we forgot to say the things we're grateful for, or I'm grateful for this, And sometimes it's like, I'm grateful for, the fact that you let me have a smoothie for dinner and I didn't have to eat that big meal, right? Or it's something like, I'm so grateful that my friend came to help me on the jungle gym today at recess when I fell. It's something like that. So, just teaching them about gratitude and mindfulness and awareness and how to have their own toolbox to calm themselves and to get through the challenging times because, there's a lot ahead of them. And also to really appreciate the joys. We celebrate a lot. When there's something that they do that's amazing, we celebrate that. When it's a small thing, we celebrate that. And I just want my kids to know that celebration is something that is really valuable in their lives and their wellness.
One of the things that you said, the little glimmers, and I love that because it's just like appreciating the small things.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that translate into just like one of the... In the podcast I listened to with you on it, they talked about your non-negotiables.
Yeah.
But you didn't really go into it. What are your non-negotiables?
My non-negotiables are space for myself every day. Never allowing someone to make me feel less worthy. Boundaries when I need them and being able to give myself permission to say no when I feel like something isn't aligned or I don't have the time or space for it. Yeah, those are the ones I can think of right now.
Okay. Earlier you had mentioned also how you were raised in a religious household and you were very tied or your family was, and you had more of a conservative upbringing. And then I want to talk about faith and spirituality. And do you still lean into your faith the same way you did when you were growing up? And what role does that play in your life now?
I don't think I do.
Okay.
I wasn't conservative. It was just like, I grew up, we went to church okay. We went to church every single weekend, no matter where we were.
Yeah.
We were on vacation. We found a church, and we went to the 4:30 mass or the 10 a.m. mass. Like it was sort of just like we had to do it. And there wasn't a lot of choice in it. And I think that that's what a lot of people do with religion, with their children, because it's sort of like, well, we're going to give you this, and then eventually you can make a choice, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I did when I went off to college. I was like, the choice is I'm not doing this anymore. And that was during the time where a lot of things in the Catholic Church were happening, and I just felt like very icky.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with being Catholic. People in my family are still very Catholic, and I think that's great, right? I just chose to open my mind to something a little bit different. And in fact, read books and, listened to things all about all different types of religion, And so I don't consider myself religious anymore. I'm a highly spiritual person. And there's a lot of religions and things that pop up that are part of that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, totally. It makes sense. I was raised Jewish. I went to Jewish day school and I got bar mitzvahed, and my family celebrates all the holidays. And then on my dad's side, he's Indian. So he was Hindu, but we did a couple holidays there, like Diwali and whatnot. And then every woman I've ever dated is Catholic, so having that exposure to the three different faiths. And I've never considered myself religious. So when I really surrendered in recovery and was introduced to the spiritual component of growth, that's really where I identified most with, where it's really at its core, it's being a good person and knowing the difference between right and wrong, and not letting ego and greed and all these vices be the North Star to my decision making and the way that I live my life and the way that I treat people. And I think that's really the underlying core of my spirituality, where it's just like, do the next right thing.
Yeah.
Help people.
I love that. Do
Smile.
the next right thing.
You
Right.
know?
Just be a good person in however way that, like, whatever that means for you.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like the ritual part of the religion I still have, and I just do it in my rituals the different way. I certainly believe in a higher power, and I call that the universe.
I love the ritual parts. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't have a Christmas tree growing up, and me and my girlfriend, we have a Christmas tree every year, and it's like my favorite time of the year. It's the best living room
we
lighting.
celebrate Christmas. We celebrate Easter. I mean, those are things that bring so much joy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of traditions that, my family of origin had developed that we still do. And it's so great, right? I'm not actually in church.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate and believe in all of those things, right? So I'm totally open-minded when it comes to religion. I respect everybody's definition of it and practices of it in their own lives. For me, I don't actually go to church, but I have so many ways that I practice it in my own home, in my own life. And I try to live by being kind and helping others as much as possible.
Yeah. You spoke a lot about the things you do, breathing, meditation, journaling, and obviously those are tools to keep you grounded spiritually. How do you stay grounded spiritually when your spirituality is being tested?
I start to pull in some things that I know help me. So, like, for example, if I'm feeling like, okay, I got to keep writing down that word trust because I feel like I need to dig into it right now, and I'm not feeling like, held. Oftentimes I will go out for a walk and I'll ask for a sign or something like that to say, like, just let me know, like, I'm being supported, and sometimes I'll see, like, I think I've seen more eagles fly above me than the average person, I certainly see
Ask and
like
you shall receive.
bucks.
Yeah.
I have like a really cool connection with animals. But lights flickering in my house sometimes, like weird things that, if you've ever read that book, Signs, it's a really cool book. It sort of talks about like asking for a sign and like how they appear. And so oftentimes I'll do that. Sometimes I'll pull an oracle card. And and that will be really cool. And I get an awesome message that will just ground me in like, it's okay, be patient, like it's coming, or like this is meant for something. And those little messages, whether they come from a glimmer out in nature or an oracle card or a friend saying something, or maybe it's a song on the radio, like those things I lean on when I feel like, I don't know, like what's happening right now. I need a little message.
It's so funny. I call those God shots, and it's like when something, like when something, when I'm searching for an answer, and I can't find it inside myself, and I need to clear my head, and I need to drain myself of just like my emotional attachment to whatever situation. For me, I go to the gym, or no, I really can't go to the gym, but I go to the gym, or I'll go for a walk. Sometimes I'll even go for a drive, and I'll hear it or I'll see it, and I'm like, all right, like that's a sign. And
when you're not forcing and you're giving yourself the space to be open and listen, oftentimes something will come your way.
You talked about trust a lot, and trust and honesty are huge components of just really being able to live purposefully, and also to live joyfully. How do trust is tough, and what is your relationship with trust? Because sometimes I think that's something that people struggle with the most, because there's so many reasons not to just unwittingly have that trusting forward mentality.
I
Especially
always
nowadays.
ask people to think about a time in their life where they forced something to happen or they had a challenge and it didn't work out, versus when they kind of let things be and they let the trust happen and they leaned into that and looking at the outcomes and remembering how they felt, like a lot of the times there is evidence in your past through your experiences that when you trust, it ends up working out, right? And working out doesn't necessarily mean it happened the way you wanted it to. It doesn't mean it's good, but it means that there was a purpose to that and it led you on some other path that maybe beat the joy, right? Maybe the thing that you wanted. So I always sort of use the looking backwards there to, say that there's evidence that we actually have already experienced this and remembering that.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I guess for me, I call it just more just a kind of having faith,
Sure.
And I guess I still have trust issues or something, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I love that perspective. I want to talk about kind of what you're doing with your business, what your goals are for your business, and what the future holds for you.
Yeah. So, I'm on a mission to help women embody their most joyful lives and find wellness from within. So I do that via one-to-one coaching. I have small group coaching. I do a mindful book club. I speak at events. I hold events. And then I have a partnership with Brianne Cutler of Be Aligned, where we do something called Joyful Alignment, which is another small group program focused on a lot of what we spoke about today, and then adding the component of human design. All of those things feel very aligned for me. I think it took a lot of years to kind of throw some things at the wall and see what sticks. And then also stop listening to necessarily what I think people want and listen to what I intuitively know I can provide that is of value to people.
Love that.
And so now I'm really focusing on affecting more and more women through helping them, develop these tools and have these rituals and this mindset to help, more women feel well and live, in the flow.
Love that. I usually end with like these rapid fire questions, so I'm gonna go.
Okay.
They're never rapid. Everyone always just like goes on a tangent, but that's fine. What does the word purpose mean for you? To you?
Meaning.
Here, let me redo that because we're gonna have that. What does the word purpose mean to you?
Meaning, direction in life, helping others.
Okay. How do you live purposefully each day?
I wake up and I have a plan for what I want to achieve and how I want to make myself and others feel.
Love that. Wow, you're really doing it rapid fire. And what advice would you give to someone on that journey of finding purpose?
Depending on where they are, to crowd out other people's opinions and take some time alone and really dig deep into what it is that brings you joy, what it is that makes you feel purposeful and brings meaning to you. Sit with that. Don't jump to, it has to be something right away. Give yourself permission to take time with it, to let it develop. Try not to ask other people's opinions and really just listen to yourself, because purpose comes from within.
I love that. Julie Vincent, Clear Space for Joy. It has been an absolute joy.
Thank you.
Having you here, and I'm really grateful that you came down and had this conversation. I really would love for you to just kind of speak directly to my audience about anything that you have coming up and how my audience can reach you.
You can find me online at clearspaceforjoy.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty active on there at I am Julie Vincent. And I have an event actually tomorrow at Bar Vita in Darien. If you happen to have availability, we're going to be meeting to juice up and wind down. It's a fun night out at Bar Vita where we're going to be providing mocktails and some really nice connection time and networking, and then helping you wind down with some acupressure and ear seeds with my friend Nancy Byrne. And then I'll be doing some visualization, meditation, and getting you all zen to have a good night's sleep. You can also join my Mindful Book Club that goes on quarterly. We just launched the spring, so it's not too late. You can still join. We're reading Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins, and we'd love to have you.
Awesome. And you just let them know how to reach you. And
yeah,
awesome.
You can reach me over Instagram. You can email me, julie@clearspaceforjoy.com.
Awesome, Julie. Thank you so much. Folks, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please, your support means the world to me. Please like, review, DM me, whatever. I'm happy to engage and talk to you and continue to grow this community. Your support matters so much to me. Thank you so much.